the year you finally stop waiting. Imagine this, it's the first morning of 2025. The sun rises like it always does, but something feels different. Not outside, but within you. There's no New Year's resolution scribbled in haste, no desperate chase to fix what was broken in the year before. Instead, there's stillness. A quiet certainty that this year, you won't just do more, you'll be more. But let's be honest, how many times have you promised yourself change, only to fall back into the same cycles of doubt, fear, and hesitation by February? How many dreams have you postponed, waiting for the right time, the perfect plan, or the clear sign? The truth is, most people enter each year with motivation but without transformation. They chase success without self-awareness, and they set goals without reprogramming the very voice that guides them. Here's the real game changer: 2025 doesn't need a new version of you. It needs a deeper remembrance of who you've always been beneath the noise. This isn't a list of motivational slogans. It's a return to ancient wisdom, distilled into 6 simple but powerful truths that, if embodied, will radically shift the way you walk through this year. These principles aren't about achieving more, hustling harder, or becoming someone else. They're about uncovering the unstoppable force already within you. In the pages ahead, we'll explore each of these truths, not just as abstract concepts, but through stories, lived experiences, and reflections that speak directly to your journey. This isn't a pep talk. It's a blueprint for becoming unshakably grounded, wildly alive, and endlessly growing. The only question is, will you merely read these truths, or will you dare to live them? Let's begin. Part 1, I am capable, the quiet power that doesn't scream. There's a story I carry with me, not from scripture, but from a stormy night in the mountains of northern Japan. I was hiking solo, just before winter set in. A sudden storm rolled through, and I found myself stranded in a narrow valley surrounded by swaying bamboo groves. What struck me wasn't just the force of the wind, but how those tall, fragile-looking stalks bent so far without breaking. They swayed, leaned, bowed to the wind, and then snapped back upright when the gusts passed. They weren't resisting. They were capable because they adapted. And that is the quiet truth we often overlook. Capability is not about domination, it's about adaptability. We live in a culture that mistakes capability for pushing harder, doing more, being louder. We're told to conquer obstacles, power through pain, and prove ourselves with medals, titles, or bank balances. But what if the real strength is in the gentle, unshakable belief that you can, even when you're unsure how? What if it's in your ability to bend without breaking? The inner war we all fight. I've met executives who command empires but crumble the moment they're alone with their thoughts. I've met artists who create beauty daily but don't believe in their own worth. Why? Because no external achievement can compensate for an internal dialogue poisoned with doubt. The voice in your head whispers, "What if I'm not enough? What if I fail? What will people think?" And so, the most talented souls sit on the sidelines, convinced they need permission to begin. But here's a shift: you don't need to be fearless to be capable, you just need to move anyway. From self-doubt to self-trust. In Buddhist philosophy, there's a concept called anatta, the doctrine of non-self. It teaches that we are not a fixed identity. You are not your past mistakes. You are not the labels others gave you. You are not your trauma, your resume, or your fears. You are change itself. And that means your capability is not something you find, it's something you realize by letting go of who you're not. Think of a child learning to walk. They don't think, "I'm not good at this, maybe I should wait until I'm more confident." No, they fall, they wobble, and they try again. They learn by doing. So why do we stop giving ourselves that grace when we grow up? Real life reflection, the story of May. Let me tell you about May, a 42-year-old woman I met at a retreat in Chiang Mai. After 2 decades in corporate law, she quit everything to study mindfulness and open a tea shop. She knew nothing about business, and for months she doubted herself. Her friends questioned her. Her savings dwindled. But each morning, she returned to her little store, brewed tea, and served anyone who came. I don't know if I'm doing it right, she once told me, but I know this feels true. 3 years later, her shop is thriving, not because she followed a formula, but because she trusted her quiet capability more than the world's noisy expectations. That's what real capability looks like, not certainty, but courage. What would you do if failure didn't matter? Here's a radical question. What would you attempt if failure wasn't a threat, but just part of the process? Would you start that project you've been postponing? Speak your truth without worrying about who approves? Finally walk away from what no longer nourishes you. Capability doesn't mean never falling. It means falling forward. Again and again. Like the bamboo, swaying in the wind but rooted in trust. Daily affirmation. This year, replace "I must prove myself" with "I trust my ability to adapt." I don't need to control everything to grow through anything. Because the moment you stop needing evidence of your strength is the moment you realize it was always there. Part 2. My path is clear, even when I can't see it. Have you ever stood at a crossroads, both literally and metaphorically, frozen by indecision? I remember a moment like that vividly, on a quiet street in Kyoto, with my backpack slung over one shoulder and my future hanging in the air. I had just left a job that paid well but drained my soul. There was no roadmap. No perfect next step. Just questions. Doubts. Fog. But then I looked down and noticed something curious. Even though I couldn't see the destination, my feet still knew how to move forward. That's the thing about clarity, it rarely arrives as a lightning bolt. More often, it whispers. One step at a time. The myth of the perfect plan. We're conditioned to think that clarity looks like a polished blueprint. We wait for a sign, a voice, a perfect vision before we move. But life doesn't unfold in neat PowerPoints. It winds like a river, through forests, around boulders, over falls. And here's the paradox. Your path becomes clear not when you plan every turn, but when you commit to walking it, fully present, even in the unknown. In Buddhism, the Eightfold Path isn't a ladder to climb but a cycle of practices, right view, right intention, right action, and so on. These don't lead to a destination as much as they awaken a way of being. Mindful, intentional, alive. So ask yourself, am I waiting for perfect clarity, or am I willing to find it along the way? The story of Elias, the detour that wasn't. Let me share Elias' story. He was a talented chef in Italy, trained in the finest kitchens, but burned out by pressure and perfectionism. So, he left. Bought a one-way ticket to Indonesia. For a while, he just wandered, teaching English, working odd jobs, cooking for strangers. Everyone around him thought he'd lost his path. But in that supposed detour, he found what he hadn't been looking for: simplicity, joy, creativity. 2 years later, he opened a small open-air kitchen in Ubud that blends Italian soul food with Balinese spices. His customers aren't Michelin critics, they're travelers with stories, laughter, and open hearts. His path wasn't lost. It was just unfolding. The illusion of being off track. How often do we panic when things don't go as planned? A job rejection. A failed relationship. A delayed dream. We think, I'm off course. But what if that course never really existed? What if every delay is a detour with a gift? Every closed door, a redirection? You're not off your path. You're simply in the part of the story where the character hasn't yet realized why the storm matters. In nature, no river flows in a straight line. Why should your life? Signs you're still on the path, even if it feels foggy. You feel resistance, but you're still curious. You're unsure, but you're still showing up. You're doubting, but something inside keeps whispering, keep going. This is the path. Not despite the uncertainty, but because of it. Daily reflection. If your journey feels uncertain right now, breathe. You're not lost. You're in the part of the process where trust becomes your map. This year, repeat to yourself, I don't need to see the whole road. I only need to take the next right step. Because the way isn't something you find. It's something you live into. Part 3. I grow stronger daily, the invisible rise beneath the surface. Strength. We often imagine it as muscle, as armor, as something unshakable and grand. But have you ever watched a tree after a storm? Its branches may be stripped, leaves scattered, but its roots, hidden beneath the earth, have grown deeper. That's the kind of strength we rarely celebrate, quiet, unseen, and forged in struggle. I once met a monk in Myanmar who told me, a strong soul bows more than it boasts. It reminded me of the image shared in the video, a rice stalk, heavy with grain, bowing low, while the empty ones stand tall. And just like that, I saw what real strength looked like. The paradox of power. In a world obsessed with performance and perfection, we're told to stand tall, never show weakness, and pretend we have it all together. But here's the paradox: true strength doesn't come from how hard you push, but from how deeply you accept. Buddhism teaches us about virya, translated as energy or effort. But this isn't frantic striving. It's sustained, gentle persistence. It's showing up, again and again, not because it's easy, but because you believe it matters. You grow stronger not by being invincible, but by being vulnerable and still choosing to rise. The story of Lena, from breakdown to breakthrough. Lena was a trauma nurse in a busy city hospital. She saw more in a day than most of us do in a year: grief, chaos, miracles, and heartbreak. After a particularly devastating case, she took a leave of absence. She felt ashamed, thinking she should have been stronger. But in that stillness, she began to write stories of her patients, her fears, her silent prayers. Slowly, she started to heal, not by toughing it out, but by telling the truth. She returned to her work a year later, not as the same nurse, but as someone more grounded, more whole. Her strength didn't come from pushing through the pain, it came from listening to it. Strength isn't always loud. We often overlook the kind of growth that doesn't come with applause. Saying no when your body needs rest. Admitting you don't have all the answers. Letting go of something, or someone, that no longer aligns. Apologizing sincerely, even when it's uncomfortable. Starting over, again and again. These small, unglamorous acts are the training grounds of real power. Growth happens in the soil of surrender. Just like a pot fills drop by drop, your growth accumulates in the quiet hours when no one is watching. Each moment of doubt that you meet with patience. Each mistake that you meet with kindness. Each setback that you use as compost for the next bloom. And here's the twist: you grow not by adding more, but by shedding what no longer serves. Let go of the need to be perfect. Let go of the story that says you should have been further by now. Let go of the illusion that strength is about never breaking. Sometimes, breaking is exactly how the light gets in. Daily mantra. This year, when you feel tired or uncertain, whisper this to yourself. I don't have to be loud to be strong. My roots grow deeper in silence. Because strength isn't the absence of struggle, it's what grows because of it. Part 4. I commit to excellence, presence over perfection. In a small temple in Kyoto, I once watched an elderly monk sweep the stone courtyard at dawn. The broom moved slowly, rhythmically. Not rushed, not forced. I stood there for almost 30 minutes, watching him sweep the same patch of ground over and over again. When I finally asked him why he stayed in one spot so long, he smiled gently and said, "The ground becomes clear, not when the dirt is gone, but when the mind is." That moment shifted something in me. I had always chased excellence as a finish line, something to reach, prove, win. But in that instant, I saw that excellence isn't a result, it's a practice of being. It's not what you achieve, it's how you show up. The lie of perfection. Modern life trains us to confuse excellence with perfection. We strive to be flawless, in our careers, our relationships, our bodies, even our spirituality. We believe if we can just eliminate every error, then we'll finally be good enough. But here's the truth: perfection is brittle. Excellence is alive. In Zen, there's a concept called samu, mindful labor. The monk doesn't sweep to finish sweeping. He sweeps as a form of meditation. The practice is the point. And so too with your life: writing, speaking, parenting, building a business, painting, making dinner. These are not performances, they are offerings. The story of Rafi, the unseen masterpiece. Rafi was a jazz pianist in New York who rarely played live shows. He'd spend hours at his piano, but almost never posted clips online or pursued gigs. When I asked him why, he simply said, "I don't play to be heard. I play to feel. If someone else hears it and feels something too, that's a bonus." And yet, his music had soul, depth, purity. Because he wasn't performing. He was present. The irony? He got discovered, not through effort or strategy, but because someone heard him playing through an open window and invited him to record. His excellence was not engineered. It was revealed through presence. Let go of the outcome. When we fixate on outcomes, likes, money, recognition, we trap ourselves in anxiety. But when we devote ourselves to the process, to the love of the act itself, something magical happens. The artist loses herself in the brushstrokes. The teacher finds joy in one student's question. The coder forgets the clock because they're building something they believe in. The friend listens without waiting to reply. Excellence isn't the goal, it's the residue of mindfulness. So ask yourself, what would I create if no one ever saw it? What would I give if no one ever thanked me? Whatever your answer is, that's where your soul lives. Practice over performance. The greatest works of your life won't be born out of pressure, but of presence. This doesn't mean you abandon ambition. It means your ambition becomes sacred, intentional, grounded. Stop trying to impress. Start trying to express. Because when you work from the heart, rather than the ego, your life becomes your masterpiece, even if no one claps. Daily reflection. This year, before you start anything important, whisper this. I don't need to be the best, I just need to be here. And trust that excellence will follow, not as a trophy, but as a trail you leave behind. Part 5, I am designed for greatness, the lotus in the mud. In the heart of a muddy pond, a seed rests in silence. It is not beautiful. It is not admired. In fact, no one even knows it's there. But slowly, without noise, without witness, it begins to move. It pushes upward through darkness, through cold water, through layers of decay and dirt, until one day, without warning, it surfaces and blooms. A radiant lotus, unblemished by the mud from which it rose. This is not a metaphor. It is a mirror. Because you, too, are that lotus. You are not designed to become great. You already are. The forgotten greatness within. In Buddhist teachings, there's a concept known as Buddha nature, the idea that every sentient being carries within them the potential for enlightenment. Not because they earn it. Not because they perform well enough. But simply because they exist. You don't have to add anything to be worthy. You simply have to remember. But somewhere along the way, you were taught a different story. That your worth is measured by your productivity. That greatness is a reward, not a birthright. That until you're perfect, you're not enough. These are lies sold by a tired world. The truth is, you are not incomplete, you are just covered in mud. The story of Amara, rising through shadows. Amara grew up in a home full of addiction, fear, and silence. She was the quiet one, always observing, always surviving. For years, she believed she was broken. Too damaged to succeed, too sensitive to matter. But in her late 20s, something shifted. She began writing. At first, just to survive, poems on napkins, scraps of stories in her journal. Over time, her pain became her palette. She published her first book of poetry at 31. It wasn't about triumph. It was about truth. And people felt it. Because her words weren't polished, they were pure. They carried the fingerprint of someone who had grown beauty from suffering. Her greatness didn't come despite her pain, it came through it. The myth of the spotlight. We're led to believe that greatness is loud. That it arrives with applause, awards, recognition. But the greatest souls I've met are often the quietest in the room. The father who gets up at 4 a.m. to work a job he hates just to feed his kids. The woman who left everything familiar to heal from trauma and learn to breathe again. The teenager who stands up for someone bullied, even when they're scared. The artist who creates every day with no followers, no fans, just devotion. Greatness has nothing to do with visibility. It has everything to do with truth lived courageously. You don't need to chase it, you need to trust it. You don't need to become great. You need to unlearn everything that made you forget you already were. Let go of the belief that you must impress to matter. Let go of the shame that says your past disqualifies you. Let go of the pressure to be someone else's version of success. Your greatness may never be on a stage, but it will live in your presence, your kindness, your resilience. And that is more than enough. Daily reflection. This year, when doubt whispers, who do you think you are? Respond gently, but firmly. I am the lotus. I rise. Not because I am above the mud, but because I come from it. And bloom, not for applause, but because blooming is what you were born to do. Part 6. External opinions do not sway me, the still mountain within. There's a mountain in the Himalayas I once visited, silent, vast, unmoved. The wind howled against its cliffs. Snow pelted its peaks. Storms came and went. But the mountain didn't shift, didn't flinch. It simply remained. We often think of strength as action, but sometimes it is stillness. And that is the strength you are called to embrace this year, the ability to stand unmoved in the face of opinion. The tyranny of praise and criticism. If you've ever changed your mind because of someone's disapproval, if you've ever dimmed your light so others wouldn't feel threatened, if you've ever doubted your worth because someone didn't get you, you're not alone. From childhood, we are shaped by rewards and punishments. We learn to smile for approval and shrink to avoid judgment. Over time, we lose touch with our truth because we're too busy rehearsing versions of ourselves that others might accept. But here's the insight from Buddhist wisdom: praise and blame are just passing weather. They are not the climate of your soul. The mirror of projection. People's opinions are not windows into truth, they are mirrors reflecting their own beliefs, fears, and unmet needs. When someone admires you, they may be seeing who they wish they could be. When someone criticizes you, they may be reacting to a part of themselves they haven't accepted. It's rarely about you. You're simply the canvas onto which their inner world is projected. Knowing this doesn't make harsh words hurt less, but it frees you from taking them personally. The story of Sanvi, speaking without fear. Sanvi was a young activist I met in Dharamsala. Soft-spoken but powerful, she advocated for women's education in rural communities. Her message was clear, but the backlash was brutal, especially online. Trolls, accusations, even threats. She almost quit. But then a Buddhist nun told her, "If the wind shakes you, go deeper into the mountain inside you." Sanvi began to meditate daily, not to become numb, but to return to her center. And she kept speaking, not louder, not harsher, but steadier. What she learned, and what we all must learn, is this: when your actions come from clarity, you don't need applause to feel valid, nor criticism to feel shaken. The paradox of detachment. Here's a surprising twist: the less you care about being admired, the more people are drawn to you. Why? Because there is something magnetic about someone who stands in their truth without needing it to be validated. They don't speak to impress. They speak to express. They don't listen to reply. They listen to understand. Their presence is a refuge, not a performance. And that's what the world is starving for. Not more performers, but more people rooted in presence. How to practice emotional equanimity. When someone praises you, receive it with gratitude, but don't cling. When someone criticizes you, reflect, but don't absorb. Instead of reacting, return inward and ask, is this about me or about them? Does this resonate with my values, or is this a projection? Is this judgment saying more about my truth or their pain? And when it gets heavy, remember, you are the mountain. The storms are not yours to carry. Daily mantra. This year, when the world pulls at you from every side, remember, I am not here to be liked. I am here to be real. Let the winds pass. Let the rains fall. And still, you stand. I am already enough, the quiet power of being. Late one night, I sat alone on a rooftop in Luang Prabang. The moon was full, luminous, scarred with craters. And as I stared at it, I realized something. The moon doesn't ask to be admired. It doesn't apologize for its imperfections. It doesn't shine brighter to compete. It just is. Whole. Present. Enough. In that moment, something softened inside me. I realized I'd spent years trying to earn a worth I had never lost. And perhaps you have too. The chase that never ends. We've been taught that we must become enough. That after we hit a certain milestone, get the job, lose the weight, find the partner, we will finally feel complete. But this chase has no finish line. Every achievement only moves the goalpost further. It's like running toward the horizon. The more you strive, the more it retreats. Buddhism speaks of sunyata, emptiness, but not in the Western sense of void or lack. Instead, it means openness, spaciousness, fullness beyond form. It teaches that we are whole not because we are perfect, but because we are limitless in potential, free from rigid identity. You don't need to earn your enoughness. You just need to remember it. The story of James, from proving to presence. James was a successful architect. Awards. Accolades. A high-rise apartment overlooking the city skyline. But beneath all that steel and glass was a man exhausted by the pressure to constantly achieve. He came to a meditation retreat, skeptical at first. On the third day, during a walking meditation, he stopped mid-step and whispered, "What if I never had to prove anything ever again?" His eyes filled with tears. That moment didn't make him lazy, it made him liberated. He returned to work not to win, but to contribute. His design shifted, simpler, more human. His life did too. When he stopped grasping, his real brilliance flowed. You don't need to do more, you need to be more. This doesn't mean you abandon growth. It means you stop growing from lack and begin growing from love. Enoughness is not a finish line. It's the starting point. When you know you are already enough, you stop begging for approval. You stop betraying yourself to belong. You stop waiting to be ready. And here's the twist, the world begins to mirror back your wholeness. Not because you convinced it, but because you carried it quietly and confidently. One day challenge, live as if you are enough. Tomorrow, try this. Don't over-explain. Don't chase compliments. Don't rush to fix your flaws. Just live. Love. Create. Speak. Rest. Not to prove anything, but simply because you're here. You are not a project to complete. You are a presence to embrace. So here we are. You've walked through 6 powerful truths and 1 quiet bonus. But these aren't just ideas. They're invitations. Not to chase a different version of yourself, but to return to the deepest version of yourself. Let's recall. 1. I am capable, not because I control everything, but because I can adapt to anything. 2. My path is clear, not because I see the whole map, but because I trust the next step. 3. I grow stronger daily, not by hardening, but by softening into my struggles. 4. I commit to excellence, not for applause, but because presence is excellence. 5. I am designed for greatness, not in the future, but in the mud-soaked now. 6. External opinions do not sway me, because I am no longer a slave to passing storms. Bonus, I am already enough, because wholeness is not earned. It is realized. These are not resolutions. These are remembrances. And 2025 doesn't need a new you. It needs the real you, the one that's been waiting patiently beneath all the noise, the expectations, and the fear. So before you scroll away, before you dive into your next task, pause and breathe. Right now. Right here. Ask yourself, what would change today if I truly believed I was enough? Then go live your answer. Because the world doesn't need you to become someone. It needs you to remember you already are.